Love you. That's why you're being punished. It didn't make sense at the time. Such connections never do to a child. But the child grows and begins to see why he would say something like that. It's because he knew that many parents in this world do not. That this was just another way in which my dad was determined to be different from others. He told me once he didn't really choose his own path, that he did what his dad had pretty much planned out for him. Though none of us would ever doubt he loved being an architect, and his passion for interesting design is palpable when he's in the room, planning out your kid's future in detail was obviously something he thought was not the ideal way to parent. For him, a radical change for his own experience. For me, I just can't imagine him being any other way. It made relating to other kids difficult at times back then. Make no mistake, there were times that it felt really hard to be John Oliver's kid. He wore crazy outfits, sandals with bright orange socks, leather caps, and white pants whenever he felt like it. Not only did he stick out visually, he had what a lot of other people considered funny or even dangerous ideas about the world. But getting out of your comfort zone and taking a chance on strangers wasn't something he talked about, it was something he lived. His life was an exercise in paying it forward. To be kind to others with no expectations is something imprinted on me because of him. It's not an easy way to live. Sometimes you get burned, and some people turn cold. But Dad never let it slow his generosity down, not one bit. He taught me a lot of things I would learn only years later that most parents didn't teach their kids. He took me to alternative energy fairs in the late 70s to show off his Volvo that ran on propane. At those, I would learn all about all kinds of innovations in environmentally friendly products and services, stuff that seems even quaint or funny now. But it was revolutionary then. Growing up, classmates hated me because I was the annoying know-it-all kid who already knew about alternative energy, or alternative manufacturing, or alternative housing. Things that aren't in textbooks and aren't discussed much because they take cooperation and consensus to maintain. Two things people who want to earn lots of money usually avoid. And two things my dad valued more than most people who even profess to hold such beliefs. He took me to Hiroshima Day to paint white shadows in the sidewalks and fold paper cranes. There I would learn that the best defense against the fear of war was doing something that made you feel empowered to change the direction of the future. He took me along for a tree sale on Arbor Day one year. Who even knows what Arbor Day is? I didn't until then. When we failed to sell very many of the young trees, we simply planted them guerrilla style at various locations he'd staked out in advance, just in case. Many of the ones I remember us planting remain in position today, having lived up to the promise of a better city that my dad assured me, and all of us really, that came with doing such things. As I mentioned, these were all just normal, sometimes even boring weekends out with my dad, for me. My dad loved to encourage the creative dreams Joe and I had, and he knew I wasn't talented with a pencil like Joe Muhammad himself. I remember waking up early one birthday morning to go to the washroom, and he had tried to hide it, but the sunlight reflected by the chrome caught my eye. It was a snare drum that he had bought for me for my birthday. I had ruined the surprise he had planned for me, so I went back to bed and feigned ignorance. The Windows is 98 is updated by now, I hope. I'd ruined the surprise he had planned for me, so I went back to bed and feigned ignorance. When my dad was beating on it himself minutes later, in the erratic fashion that only a person with John Oliver's sense of timing can, I emerged from my room, acting annoyed, then surprised. I'm pretty sure I matched the image of the excited surprise that he had likely predicted I would have, because he seemed pretty happy about it. I made him happy. It was a power I'd never really known I had before then. And he still doesn't know I knew ahead of time about the snare drum, so nobody repeat this. This would be the first day together towards our quest to put some Oliver into the world of music somehow, something that despite the fact that he had had it as a dream of his own since being a choir boy, he had never really dared to try it. He was my biggest fan from day one. He came to see me play with the school band. He let me set up and badly play my drums in the house. He let my bandmates and I practice right in the living room. He came to see so many shitty bands, including some of my own. Being the only person over 20 so many times in so many crappy venues, all just to hear me play a few notes. Some kids had hockey dads. I had a punk rock dad. And it was the best thing ever. Here's something many of you involved in many of all of his other activities may not know. That with all the resources, time, advice, photocopies, car rides, crash pads, jam spaces, actual cold-hearted cash, and more, John Oliver is the unsung hero of the East Coast punk rock and independent music scene during the years that I was working in it. All because he loved me and wanted to support me, but also because he was showing me and all of my friends and bandmates how to build a community around the culture we were creating all by ourselves, that we were just too young and naive to know. He was no different as I took some of my radio skills a bit further and dove deeply into DJ culture and opened my record shop in Halifax. It wouldn't have been half as cool without him involved, and in many ways it was as much his shop as it was my own. Papa Nonsense was what my DJ friends called him. With the opening of my boutique in '97, he could scratch off another item off the long list of childhood dreams, both big and small, to be fulfilled. However, exactly whose list we were crossing off, I suppose, is the open question. I was never more proud of him than when he told me he was finally taking cello lessons. I knew how difficult playing an instrument like the cello could be. I knew how intimidated he was already, let alone how much he would be after only taking a few lessons, or some good-natured teasing about how bad he was from hands. How he made the time for it would have been a wonder to us all, but I'm sure he would have given it the dedication he gave to everything else in his life with just a little more time. How unfortunate the big recitals he had no doubt would have played for us all are now out of reach. As unimportant to others as it might sound, he taught me what being cool meant. We've all been teenagers and slaves to the word cool, that code word for a marketing cachet that attempts to commodify something that cannot. My dad taught me that being cool wasn't just using your critical judgment all the time, but also falling in love with interesting and weird things. Sometimes the very reason you know something is cool is because you're the only one who knows how to appreciate it fully. You're the only one who knows how cool it really is. He taught me that being cool isn't being aloof, being cool is caring enough to make something better. Being cool is being yourself, and screw anyone who doesn't get it. As a mixed-up kid running around with a lot of other mixed-up kids, this lesson kept me strong through all kinds of peer pressure and other conflicts. It was wisdom I would share unknowingly with other kids not fortunate enough to have a parent like John, simply by there being fewer degrees of separation between them and John Oliver. This was something I would appreciate more and more in adulthood. Standing up for yourself is hard when you're a kid. Knowing your dad has your back every step of the way, even if you make a mistake, made all the difference. I wouldn't have accomplished a fraction of what I have without him. I can only hope I can accomplish a fraction of what he did before we end up having a service like this one for me. But most of all, what I learned from him was that people matter. The well-being of strangers matters. The strength of the community in which you live matters. How much you care about people other than yourself. How much you care about the things that benefit people, even if you are not among the beneficiaries, matters. Visiting a friend out in Calgary a few years ago, my friend remarked about the coldness of strangers there. And he said, you know, they could really use 100 John Olivers out here. Maybe even thousands. I think he's right. Now more than ever, we could really use more people like John Oliver. As parents, as people, as citizens, engaged locally and globally, as human beings. My dad always had an alternative for everything. If there was something you told him about, the next time you would see him, he would offer you 5 different solutions. There was always a different way of doing things. Why don't we try it this way? Or what if we did it this way instead? Were sometimes things my dad said that other people found unwelcome. Not for me. He always saw more choices before me than I did, and his insight was invaluable to every problem I faced. But then you have to put thought into action. We have to get our hands dirty to do anything, let alone make the world we want. And that's what he did. And that's why I love him still. He was my dad.